Hello, everyone, and happy Wednesday. There's going to be a lot of people with sore backs in Ontario. I think we have had a ton of snow in the last few weeks, really, and there's been a lot of shoveling going on. So it's a great time to be indoors and painting. So grab your brushes. We're just going to get right into it here. Let me just get my screen up. There we go. All right, so a couple of weeks ago when I was doing my demos, I had asked everybody what they wanted me to demonstrate. And one of the most popular requests that I received, either from that demo or from private messages and things like that, was doing portraits. Well, it's a little hard to do a portrait, an entire portrait realistically in an hour. So we are going to take it one piece at a time. So today we're going to focus on eyes. So let's take a look at the reference picture I've chosen. This was from Pixabay. And I took this because it's a little bit of a 3/4 turn. I believe the last one that I did was more straight on. And there's a lot of different things that happen when the eye starts to turn, or when the head starts to turn and we're looking at the eye at an angle. So let me see here. We need a pencil. All right, so I'm just going to grab a pencil. This is just an ordinary HB pencil, nothing special. I'm just working on a very small piece of Arches 140-pound cold press paper. And I'm going to do this fairly large, and I'm doing it large so that I can better understand the anatomy and so on. Now, here's something that I see time and time again, is that we all know that the eye is a basic shape like this. Yes, we all know this, but as the eye turns, there's a very good chance we're not going to see the entire corner of the eye. We will see something more like this. So if we have the pupil in the middle, here we might be looking at something like this. And we don't see this corner, and everybody seems to want to put both corners in regardless of which direction you're looking, which always looks a little bit strange to me. So we need to switch our thinking into not what we think we should be seeing, but what we're actually seeing. So let's take a look here. We are seeing the corner of the eye, but I want you to really notice that it's not a corner. It doesn't come to a point. And one thing that messes everybody up is that they're following the lash line and not actually the skin line. And you'll see that there's a big difference between where the lash is attached to the skin, the under lid, and where the lid actually touches the eye. There's an actual thickness there. So we need to take that into consideration, and this is quite rounded. So I actually kind of like this reference as well, because she's got freckles and things, or he. I don't know if it's a she or a he, but I think it's a she. And one of the first things that I always talk about is not only just the drawing, but as we start painting, we're going to be considering the area around the eye. So if you just do the eyeball, it's a little hard to really put it into context. So we need to put some of the skin tone around the eyes before we actually can understand the ins and outs and the shape of the whole eye, because the eye is more than the eyeball. It is also the eyelid, the brow line, the socket underneath. So I'm going to look at the overall angle. It's a little bit like this. So keeping that in mind, I'm going to try to create the same sort of angle, and I may start with that same sort of shape that we're all familiar with, okay, but then I have to refine it, and I'm going to really be looking at the little nuances. So for example, this shape here kind of dips down a little bit, and it's quite rounded, and then it comes up a bit. And this part here, it's pretty straight across. And as it comes up, this is where it starts to get really rounded here. That's quite rounded. And a lot of people will see this lash line, and that's where they put the white of the eye right to the end of the lashes. So be watching for that. That's something very important that often gets overlooked. So, by the way, I do these demos every Wednesday, and if you have a comment or a question as we go along, please put it in capitals in the chat box so that I can see it at a glance, right? It's a little hard for me to watch all of the chat as it's happening, as well as talking and demonstrating at the same time. So if you put it in capitals, I'll spot it quickly. I'm not a speed reader, unfortunately, so it helps me out. I won't think that you're yelling at me, put it that way. All right, so this little corner of the eye, the tear duct. Let's take a look at this tear duct. Let's get this shape right here. All right, so there's this angle here that kind of cuts across like this. And there's actually two of them, two little spots there. In this particular case, don't take this as a formula, because not every person has the same anatomy, right? We're all a little bit different. So this isn't a formula. Pardon me. So now we need to think about how this eye is going to fit into its socket. So we need more than just this. We need to have this lid here, and we need to look at not what we think it should be, you know, an evenly spaced little line that goes across. Look how close it comes to the lash line right here. But there's a bigger gap right here, that sort of thing. So let's see, this starts somewhere here. And then it comes almost straighter across. Not quite, this person doesn't have a hooded eye, but they have a little bit of skin that's coming down over their eye. So that brings that down. Pardon me, I need some water. All right, so now that we have some of this in place, let's think about, I think actually I've got this a little too rounded here. I'm going to just curve that or straighten that a little bit, or make that less of a curve right there. I very often will do my drawing on a separate piece of paper so that I don't have to do a lot of erasing on my actual watercolor paper, and then I'll trace a clean drawing onto my watercolor paper. But for this exercise, I just want to get the drawing done and then straight into painting instead of transferring. So I'm going to draw it straight onto my paper. This will have to come down a little bit more. Okay, so what about this lower lash line? It comes down, but this is weird. Look at this. And this is one of the reasons I chose this photo, because we always think of the eyelashes as going up. But look here, these eyelashes are going down. Likewise, the bottom lashes aren't just going down, they're coming sort of up here as well. How strange, right? It's because the eye is rounded and the lashes don't come, they come out, and they will, the upper lashes will dip down before they curl up. The lower lashes will sometimes come up a little bit before they go down, but mostly they go down. All right, so let's take a look here. This lash line starts here, and it's dark in this section right here. So we'll call this a lash line. This is kind of where the roots of the lashes are. not the actual lashes themselves, but the roots of the lashes. So if I come across here, and this will come up something like that. You'll notice we don't even see that thickness on the upper lash or upper lid, right? We don't see that thickness, not until we get right over here. And even over here in the corner, we see lashes that are covering a lot of that. So these lashes that are going to come down, they're really going to kind of cover that up. Like if I did a dotted line there, you might actually see the skin, the thickness of that upper lid, but we're not seeing it because the lash is actually covering it up. So really learn to start looking at things like whether it goes up or down. No assumptions, just look carefully. It will help, it'll go a very long way in helping you understand the construction, shall we say, of the lid. So now let's place the eye, and the tendency is to want to put it in the middle, but this person's looking to their left, our right. And so if I'm looking at where the pupil is, or where the middle of this circle is, it's maybe 1/3 between here and here, maybe 1/3 of the way in this direction. So maybe there will be the center of the eye. All right, so let's go with the iris here. It's almost touching the bottom. Oh, it actually is touching the bottom. So let's put that down there, but just barely. It's not really, we're not losing a lot of the bottom of the eye, and we're not assuming that there's white in the eye there. There's not. Okay, so this doesn't curve like this, like I was going to do. This actually comes from here and goes down. So I haven't got the shape quite right, not yet. So I have to fiddle with this a little bit until I get what I need. Okay, so I think I'm pretty close now. This lower line just cuts across that iris there, just a little bit. So it's important to talk about these structures, and I really encourage you, I could have taken this and traced it, and that would have been fine if I just want to get to the painting part. But if I really want to understand it, I will learn to draw it. And so that's going to help a lot. Now I can see that I've got way too much white of the eye here. So something isn't quite right here. And I think I need to make, because I'm actually working a fair bit larger. And this needs to come across. More like that. So we have to assume that this iris is actually a complete circle at some point, or in this case, because it's turned, it would be an oval. But the center of the eye is here. There's going to be some highlights through here as well. But I'm still feeling like this is too curved. That feels a little better. Now, if I adjust that line, that means I also have to adjust the one above, because now there's too much space there. So it's a little bit of push-pull, making corrections as you go kind of thing, until you're satisfied that the structure is right. Now we have a brow line, or where the eyebrow is going to go. And this I'm going to do really lightly. A lot of people will kind of do an outline of an eyebrow, as if, you were doing a cartoon kind of thing. I'm just going to put a few lines that might indicate the direction of these hairs on the eyebrow. They kind of go up, and then they, from the top, they kind of come down, and then from the bottom, they go up on an angle. All right, so this extends past the eye a little bit, and then we have the side of the face right here. Okay, what about this nose? There is a nose, and there's this sort of curve right here, right? It's where the bridge of the nose is. So I want to indicate that, but I better do it really lightly, because anything that I paint over this, because I'm using transparent color, is going to show those pencil lines. So I'm not really looking to show pencil lines in my drawing, so I have to do this really lightly. Some people will even work with, say, watercolor pencil, so that those lines end up dissolving as they paint. You know, to each their own. I tend to use just pencil, but you could do that. So if I'm looking at this overall shape, and I'll do it really lightly, it comes in close to the, fairly close to the tear duct. Curves out. Then we have this sort of dark area under here, and I might want to indicate that a little bit. Just a little bit. I say a little bit because, again, I don't want to have the pencil lines showing. I often get students who will say to me, yeah, I painted it, but how do I get rid of these pencil lines now? And the trouble is that once you get pencil lines wet, they become pretty permanent. Okay. All right, so I think I'm getting close to the point where I need to start painting, but I want to indicate where some of these lashes are going to go, because if I just assume where the lashes are going to go after the fact, I might find that, oh, I didn't leave enough space, or I put too much space somewhere. So if I start sort of indicating where the lashes are, not all of them, just a couple, and do it lightly, then I'll have a better idea of whether or not I've got a correct drawing. Now, I'm doing this very lightly, and I'm really looking at the lash direction. Okay, so it curls down and to the left here. So down and to the left, and then they start to get a little shorter as they sort of come and then almost come straight towards you. So they're going to curl kind of up, and then they start doing this sort of thing where they're swooping up to like going in the opposite direction, because it's going around a sphere, right? It's going in the opposite direction, and some of it is actually coming down over the eye. So I noticed that's happening here. We're also seeing some of the shadow of the lashes in the eye, which we'll get to eventually. These extend up past the crease in the eye, but I'm really looking now at the direction. This person has eyelashes I wish I had. And they look natural too. It's just not fair. All right, so let's take a look at these ones at the bottom. They're funny here. They go up, and they don't look like they're long. They do have some length. It's just that they're coming towards you, so you're getting the foreshortening effect. So here, and they are coming from this lower lash line that we drew. That's where they're starting from, basically. Don't make them too straight because, you know, it's a general area. It's not like an actual line, but it's a general line. Up first and then down. Okay. Even kind of a dark spot right there. Okay, so I think I can start thinking about the skin tone area around the eye. This is where I'm going to start building the structure, you know. So imagine this as a sculpture, and we have to carve away the shadows. So we're going to carve those away with paint, of course, but I want to get a general skin tone for this person. It looks to be a fair skin, so I'm going to use a raw sienna. I'm going to start with a raw sienna. It needs to be pinked up, of course, so I'm going to go with maybe some alizarin crimson. And because I really want to have a lot of the white of the paper showing through, I want to use this paint fairly transparent. So now this to me looks a little too peach, right? It's just a little too much. So if I were to take the complementary color, now you got to go really easy with this, but a complementary color, so a blue of some kind. I'm going to use cerulean blue here, just a little bit. I'm going to put it off to the side because I don't want to destroy this color. I just want to tone it a little bit. So a little bit on my brush, not very much. Mix it in there. That feels just a little bit more believable. Okay, so it's not quite as crazy and wild peachy pink as what I started with. You can see that's browned that down a little bit. If I added too much, oh, I would have a horrible color. So you really have to be careful. So let me start off with some really nice wet color, and I'm just going to wet this area. This is going to be the lightest color in here, and so on, the lighter areas that we see. So I'm going to come around this eye. In fact, I can come right through the tear duct here because that's in the same family. I'm going to come right around the eye. Now, very often, especially if it's an older person, you might actually see the skin, like some artists will paint the skin tone right through the pupil. And that's often the case for somebody who's older. The white of their eye isn't as bluish at an older age. It becomes a little bit more ivory, shall we say, to put it kindly. But I want to get this, I want to keep this nice and transparent, so really watered down so that lots of that white paper can come through. I want to make sure that you know, we don't have to use something horrible like white paint in the end, because white paint always looks kind of gray on on watercolor paper. Now, I don't need to worry about this background. I can go right to the edge there. It doesn't matter because that's going to end up being dark anyway. So I've got a light color in there. I'm going to put down that big flat brush, and I'm going to pick up a smaller brush, like a number 7 round, and maybe just get a little bit darker color. So to get it darker, it's a little less water. Raw sienna. I thought I wet my color, but it doesn't look like I've got very wet paint here. Okay, a little more blue. I always put my complementary color off to the side and just bring it in, like adding flavor to your stew or something. You just add a little bit, try it out, and if you like it, don't put any more in, kind of thing. But if you just take a whole brush load of complementary color and mix it in, very often you end up just sort of destroying your puddle. So just put it off to the side, and then you won't have an issue. Let me get some paper towel here. I always have to have my paper towel for blotting, because I want my brush, well, I've actually talked long enough. I don't have a shine on here anymore. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to wipe this tape off, and I will dry what I have. If this still had a shine on it, I'd be able to work into it, but I know, there's no shine left. Look at that, nothing. So I'm going to dry what I have. Then I'll re-wet it in order to build on this. So always be aware of the dampness of your paper when you go in, especially if you're mixing a new color like this. You go in and your mix is wetter than the paper, you're inviting trouble. So if you want to have control, make sure that you are keeping your brush and your paint drier than the paper. But keep an eye on the paper, because if it gets too dry, you just might have to stop. For me, that ends up meaning lots and lots of layers, but I'm a realistic painter, so I need to work that way. For me, anyway, that's my sort of go-to. And as I look at this reference picture here, I can see that there are areas where the skin is thinner, and we're seeing more of the blood vessels, I guess, closer to the eye. So you're going to see it almost a little bluish or greenish in some of these areas. Look here, it's a little bit greenish, but here it's a little more reddish. So we're going to see different variations of this mix over here. So I want to have kind of two versions, one that's a little more bluish and one that's a little bit more reddish, I guess. And I'm going to mix that up before I wet my paper, because obviously I don't want it to dry while I'm mixing paint. So let's get a little more, let's mix this into my bluer puddle. And over here, a little bit more reddish. So let me bring this over so you'll see what I'm doing. All right, so this is permanent alizarin crimson that I'm using, mixed with raw sienna. So we don't want it just red, right? We need to have it toned down a little bit. Now that can have a little blue in it, and that's fine. That makes it a little bit more natural looking. But careful how much blue. Let's go a little bit more red, because I know that some of those areas need to be a little bit more red. So, okay, so I've got a little bit more of a reddish color here. Let's take a version. This is cerulean blue. And we'll make a sort of a bluish color over here. A little more raw sienna. Sorry, I forgot to put my phone on silent. All right, so that's looking a little bit too gray, so I need a little bit more of the cerulean blue in here. All right, so I've got sort of a greenish and a reddish color. These are, let's call them my carving colors. Okay, I'm going to carve out shadows. Why do you see a square pupil? I don't know. Do you see a square pupil? Oh, you mean in here? Yeah, it's a little vague in this little section there. It's really more of an oval, but it's not that easy to see in this reference, so I didn't want to draw it in too precisely. All right, so now that I have dried this, I've got my colors prepared. I'm going to wet my surface so that anything that I put in here is going to have soft edges. If I don't wet it first and I start putting paint on a dry surface, I will end up with a lot of hard lines, and I don't want that. And I'll have a cartoon person if I have a lot of hard lines. Again, I don't need to worry about what's over here on the right. That's going to be nice and dark. But I'm going to go around all of this. Yeah, I'm going to go around the tear duct as well. That actually is a fairly hard line, so I can work around that. All right, you'll see me kind of leaning to the side. It's because I'm looking at the shine on my paper. That indicates to me whether I've got the water evenly distributed, because evenly distributed water will really help me in understanding what my paint's going to do when it hits the paper. It's not going to grab in one spot and pool in another kind of thing. So distribute it evenly. I dried it, so the first layer's staying put. It's not going anywhere, especially since it was thinner paint and not thick color or anything like that. Now I'm using this smaller brush. This is a number 7 round. It's a squirrel hair brush, but a synthetic brush would work fine. And I'm going to look first of all for some of these greenish areas. And they're not dark green. This is important. You just want to go soft with these layers, especially when you're building shape, because it's important to not make this poor person look bruised. If you go too heavy with these blues and greens, that can happen. So be very careful of where you're putting, that you're only being gentle with some of this. Okay, I'm going to switch over. Well, let's put a little bit right up here where the lash is. That green might be just a little hint of reflection from the eyelashes or the eye even. I don't know, but it's that's what it's giving me. Okay, so we've got a bit of this reddish color in here, and I can see that's really, it's like exploding on my paper. That means my brush is too wet, or wetter than I want it to be to have control. So we're going to come up under here and look for that darkness under the eye. No, I'm not going to go hyper realistic or anything like that on you today. But there's like the texture in the skin and all of that. I'm trying to get I really want to focus on the eye, but I don't want to get into hyper mode where I'm, showing every little pore on the skin or anything like that. And this comes, I can see a reddish color under the lashes here. And I can definitely see some reddish color. Sorry, let me bring this down. If I can bring it in closer. Let me try this. Okay, so let me fold it and I can get it a little closer. A little bit reddish here. Now this isn't really, I wouldn't call this red really. It's a warmer color for sure, but I'm not sure I would call it red. All right, I can feel the paper starting to dry, which means my brush should start getting a little bit drier, but I have to acknowledge that, you know, I might have to get out of here pretty soon. You know, my paper's telling me that I'm running out of time. There's some red down the side of the nose here. I won't do the entire face. You know, I'm really more concerned with the proximity of the eye. And in behind the eyebrow here, there might be a little bit of warmth in there too. So now, if you tuned into the last couple of weeks, you'll know that I was working on some pets. And I was talking about getting the softness in the fur, and how to do so to continue painting without having to constantly stop and dry. I was using a clean flat brush and blotting it, and I could brush over an area in order to keep going. I meant to turn off, I have a flickering light in my room, in my studio, that I have to fix. And it's flickering away there. So if you see lights flashing, it's not my camera or anything. It's a fluorescent light that I have to get repaired. All right, so I'm keeping some of these areas light. I can even, if I work at it, I can lift a little bit if I need to, but I don't think I need to. It might still look a little dark, but wait until the darks are actually built up, because we're not there yet. So I like what I have. I don't want to mess it up. So I'm gonna quickly dry this. It won't take long because I didn't really get it all that wet in the first place, but I'm going to dry this. And I think I'm going to get my reddish puddle a little bit more red. Okay, just let that cool down to room temperature. And I'm going to bring a little bit more of that alizarin crimson in. Just make it a little bit more red. Not pure red, obviously, but some of these areas are still a little wet, but I'm gonna wet one area at a time now, because I know I can only work a certain area before it runs out. Okay, damp. And I just blotted my brush there just to make sure that it didn't explode as soon as it hits the paper. So I'm going to get stronger, bolder here, especially where the crease is. The crease is extra dark. Oh, I didn't wet down there. Knew immediately as when I touched that. You can see that, too, was a dry spot. I think I can probably zoom in a little bit closer. You do have this image here to look at. You know, I won't be able to bring this right into the screen if I zoom in, but you probably want to see what I'm painting more than you need to see the reference anyway. So there we go. I'm going to zoom right in here. So you can see more of the exact stuff. Now look at this hard line. I want to get rid of that. I've blotted my brush and I just brush it along there. I'm looking to correct any hard lines that might crop up. And let's get in here. This is quite dark in this little spot here. I'm seeing this this really dark area right here. And even a little bit more red as we get into the tear duct. So up in here, oh, that's a little bit too bright red. Let's get a little bit of that greenish color mixed in there, so it's not bright red. It's a deep red, but it's not. I wouldn't call it a bright red. It's a toned down red. All right, so let's get this shape right here. There's a little highlight in that part there. I'm just going to leave that little sliver of a highlight right there. Actually, there's two highlights, so let's get both in there. I'm painting around these, so I am negative painting around the highlights. I have some harder edges there I want to soften, so I've blotted my brush and I'm just gently tickling any of those harder edges that I don't want. There we go. And I'm going to come up and reinforce this crease even more. This is going to get pretty dark up in here. Let's blot and soften that as I go. It all gets pretty dark. Do I use a blow dryer heat gun? I can use. Can I recommend the one you use specifically? Yeah, this is. It's called a Ranger Heat It Craft Tool, and I bought this on Amazon a while ago, and I don't know. I think it's under $40 Canadian. So, but it's a handy little heat tool. You know, if you have masking fluid on your paper, don't be using it too extensively because it can bake your masking fluid on. But yeah, I really like it. I'm gonna go a little bit deeper still. Let's make sure my brush isn't too wet. I've got a color over here on my palette that's pretty close to what I'm trying to make actually. This is called Perylene Maroon that I've got on my palette because I'm painting something else. But you're cutting out of the feed a bit. Might be all of the weather. Oh, it might be. My feed is fine. It says my connection is excellent, so it must be on your end. I'm sorry about the. I can't do anything about the weather. Let's need to keep that light, so let's pull that off, that little bit that I put on there. Really getting these creases established here. I'm going to go a little bit more into that cerulean mixture here, I think, a little bit. I'm going to keep this soft. Dampen it first. And I want to come up into this crease with this this color. Trying to keep everything fairly soft at this stage. Yeah, sorry to you guys that are having that. Why the red color in that crease above the eye? To me, it looks dark brown. Yeah, we can tone things down, but we can't bring them back again. It would be pretty easy for me to tone that down, but if I made it too brown, sometimes your painting looks a little bit lifeless. Now, it will get toned down. You'll see as I keep moving along. Let's dampen this and really start. I'm going to create the roundness of this this part of the eye here. We've got dark here, a little bit dark there, but it's definitely lighter here. Well, we can't make it lighter than it is, but I can darken these other areas around it. So I'm going to dampen all this. Now, I've wet that because I want to make sure that this isn't too light. Now, let's bring a little bit more of that cerulean into this mixture. That's where the brownness is going to start coming in. Still a little too wet there, or a little too dry in that spot. I must have missed an area. There we go. That should be pretty wet now. So I want to come in here and start making this area a little bit darker. Slightly more on this side. Not a lot. Almost a little bit more of that cerulean or turquoisey kind of color on this side. Not dark. Just soften this. And you'll notice that what happens when I'm painting is I kind of have to react to whatever happens on the paper. You know, I can plan it out in my head, but you know, it doesn't always execute exactly as I hope. And if that happens, I need to react really quickly. So I'm going to take a little bit of this cerulean color and start bringing a bit of that in here. Now this is all starting to look a little bit crazy, and it's really hard to kind of look past the context, like, you know, the idea that this is supposed to look like an eye. It's looking really strange at the moment, but as we go along, we can start to build up other areas and things will start to make a little bit more sense, right? So I'm trying to get the shape of things that are happening in and around the eye before actually painting the eye. So we'll get to the good stuff in a minute. So I'm wetting this area under here. I want to make sure I've got wet area to work into here, and there is a little bit of shading right under here. It's subtle. It's not really in your face. And you really need to think about how subtly or how boldly you are putting down your paint, because that's really going to sculpt that shadow. So it comes from about here. Let's go a little bit more of that cerulean. I'm going to just put my phone on silent so it doesn't disturb us again. Just a little bit. under here. Now let's go into that other mixture with a little bit more of the permanent alizarin crimson and raw sienna. And that comes in here. Okay, so it's actually looking okay, but it doesn't look right yet because we have so many things that we still have to balance off. But this is a point in my painting where I have to get rid of that white because that white is just throwing things off. So I'm going to dry what I have. And we'll get rid of that white eyeball because it's way too white. Wiping off my tape so that those little droplets of water don't make a blossom somewhere or do something nasty. There you go. I'll know when this is dry, when the paper's flat again. Meanwhile, I'm going to look to see if I've missed any questions. Okay. Susan says she went out of YouTube and got back in, and her audio's fine now. So, yeah, I don't know what it is. Last couple of weeks, it seems like YouTube's having a little bit of issues with audio. But I mean, I'm reading full strength, good signal. Like everything from my end seems like it's working great. Sometimes people see it on the replay and go, "Oh yeah, I guess it was okay after all." I don't know why, but. Does anyone see an almost heart-shaped highlight on the top left lid? Oh, I see what you're saying. Right in this spot right there. Right in the... Ah, gotcha. Angela says, does anyone see an almost heart-shaped highlight on the top left lid, or do I have a pixel problem? No, it could almost be a heart. Will I adjust some of this? I probably will. Often I sort of get more of the painting filled in, especially getting rid of the whites. And then I go back and I adjust some things. Sometimes I think, oh, that's dark enough. And then I cover up the white and I go, that's not dark enough at all. So, yeah, it does. Sometimes you have to do a little bit of revisiting areas and things like that as you go. Have I tried St. Armand handmade papers? Off topic, but was wondering what they're like. Actually, no, I don't know that one. I have heard of it. I've had a couple of people mention that in the chat before, but I've never seen it anywhere in the local stores here, or even on the websites that I typically purchase from. But I don't even know who makes it, so or where it's made or anything like that. But if you have any supplies or suppliers in your region, let me know. I will add it to my list of materials on my website. I have a page called Materials, and I went back in and I edited everything to indicate where it's located, because some people are shopping regionally now, and or just want to know where they're buying it from. So there you go. Oh, they're made in Montreal. Good to know, Lynn. Thank you. I will look that up and maybe add them to my list. I don't think I have them on my list, so I will add that. Thank you. Just after the darker bluish area. Yeah, I'm not sure where you mean then. But anyway, let's get rid of that white of the eye. Now, before we do, I want you to notice how blue it is, but I also want you to notice that it's wet. And just like we did in the tear duct where we left highlights, we're going to need to do that on the blue of the eye as well. Trust the process. Yes, Karen, that's exactly what we're doing. Okay, so to get rid of the white of the eye, I'll fold this over even more since I'm not really using that dark area just now. I like to have this in close proximity as I'm working because I can work more accurately. I've actually painted it or drawn it a little larger than the reference, but that's fine. I just have to keep that in mind. Keeping it close is helpful. Now, I think this cerulean blue doesn't look like it's right for this, so I'm going to go with a cobalt blue instead because it's a little bit more of a warm blue than the cerulean. Okay, so we don't need it dark. Again, we don't want to have like bright blue in the white of the eye. We just want to have some of the color in there. So let's come in here. And there, I'm going to be leaving some white area. Now, I'm not going to get too specific about it. I don't know what's reflecting in the eye here in terms of the blue, but I'm going to just keep it fairly random. We don't have to do an episode of CSI. We're actually identifying people in the in the reflections. You ever notice that in the crime shows? They always show they'll look in a glass window to see a reflection, to see who the culprit is or something like that. And sometimes they'll even look at a reflection of an eye. Oh, now I did something I didn't want to do, which was cover up some of the white shine at the bottom here. So let's see if I can lift some of this off. One thing I do know about cobalt blue is it will lift pretty easy. So I'm using some clean water here. I just get that wet, blot that off right away. There we go. Dry paper towel. I should be able to keep that light area right there. Okay. I want to keep that there's a little bit of wet at the bottom of the eye, so I want to make sure I'm keeping that. And over here, don't see too much white right there, but let's go into some of that pinkish color. I'm going to get a little bit of that in this corner. And I think a little bit in this corner as well. I'm going to blend it in, I think. Blot my brush and just blend that in. Okay. It's a start. It looks weird because it's so blue, but it's a start. All right, so let's talk about the iris, and we also have a couple of highlights in the eye here. Now I'm not going to mask them off. I mean, you could, but I won't. I'm not sure that they're really that perfect and crisp up close. I'm actually thinking I might have this iris a little bit too large. Let me dry this. See if I can erase that pencil line and shift this just a little bit. This pupil looks too large to me. I'm gonna move that over a little. See if I can blend that in a little bit. Okay, so that looks a little bit better to me. Now let's talk about this iris, and it is got some bits of green in there, so maybe some of that turquoise, or I could take that cobalt and add a little bit of blue to it to make it a little bit more greenish in areas. So down in here, now I'm looking, once again, I'm looking at the lighter areas. You know, it's like when I did the skin tone. I put the lightest areas down first, and then I built on top of it. Don't go dark and go, oh, how am I going to get the lights in there? You have to think backwards in watercolor. Okay, so let's get this light in there. We definitely need to go a little darker with the blue. Now, that blue might be a little bit too clean, too pretty. So let's take a little bit of, I'm going to take a little burnt sienna, just maybe a bit of burnt sienna or something to a complement to dull it down a little bit, right? Just bring a little bit of that in there, and then we get something more like a denim. All right, let's come in and get this dark part of the iris. Now down here at the bottom, can you see that little wet area in the eye? We need to keep that little sliver of white along the bottom of the eye there. That's what makes it look wet. And as I come up into the eye, and I can go right through the pupil because of course that's going to be darker, but as I come up into the rest of the eye here, I have to remember where the highlights are, because I don't want to paint through them. I haven't got those very well blended, but I'll revisit those. A lot of eyelashes in the way of these highlights as well, so they're a little tricky to find, but I'm going to make my best guess here. All right, that's a mess. Agreed? That's kind of a mess. So I'm going to go back into some of my greens and just see if I can kind of reactivate that wet paint and see if we can smooth things out a little bit here. Basically, I'm just getting the whole area equally wet, and you'll find that will smooth things out a little bit. There, as long as I get everything wet again. It was fresh enough paint that I was able to do that without a lot of difficulty. Okay, so as a first layer, I've got the general color in the general places. Okay. I almost think that some of this blue could be even darker than I have it. Now that I got rid of most of the white, I feel like I could make some of this blue a little bit darker. Maybe not that dark, but and you'll see that the more I add color to the white of the eye, the more that little shine shows up. You know, so if you really want to make the eyes look wet or dewy or whatever the case may be, but usually a little bit wet, make sure that you've got enough color elsewhere to make those highlights actually show. It's one of the key things that I talk about when I'm painting glass. You know, and an eye is a little bit like glass because it's so shiny, right? It's wet, so it's very shiny. I was out the other day, actually. We have quite a lot of icicles on our roof. And I was out taking pictures of icicles because they have this wonderful, you know, glossy, wet shine. And that might be a demo for another day. So I'm mixing up a little bit more of this reddish color here so that I can go into the tear duct and start, you know, deepening some of those areas. Put a little blue into it. Get it a little deeper. And I can start carving out a little bit more. So I can come in and get a little bit darker in some of these spots. Need to make sure this is a duller red. Like it's not super dull yet, but it's definitely got to be darker. And I'll come in and eventually dull some of that down. Leaving some of the original color, but really want to get a little bit darker there. Okay, really getting some of those things established. Let's do a little bit more of that in the crease of the eye as well. I'm going to go a little bit more of that cerulean blue mixed into that to make this even a little bit more sort of gray in this crease. And it tapers off and then we don't see it. Right, that crease kind of fades away. So I'm going to soften these edges at the ends so that we don't see like kind of a hard start and stop, because it's not the way the skin wraps around that shape. A little bit more dulling down needed here with the cerulean. Let's soften some of that edge, soften some of the edge at the front, that sort of thing, so that you don't get like a, if you have a hard start and stop to all of these shapes, it's like doing that on fabric. You know, if you're painting fabric and you have a hard start and stop line, it looks too abrupt. It looks like a line. It looks like a design on the fabric as opposed to the shape of the fabric. So the same thing goes here. My chat seems to have stopped. I don't know why, or maybe you're just not chatting. I'm not sure. But let me put this back here. Okay, let me know you're still there. Am I talking to myself? I don't know. All right, so there's I see a little bit of a kind of a deeper color along here. I'm just going to go right along the edge of this eye here. It kind of connects to that. There we go. That kind of a dark line, and it looks funny at the moment, but we will. Oh, good. Thanks, Pat. We will be building that up. Let's come in. I'm going to go a little darker on this right side. Do the same on this side. All right, so we're really starting to really build up on some of those shadows and get them deeper and darker and more established. So let's come in here. There's even a couple of very slight creases in the eye here. Put some of those in, but I'm going to soften them. I don't want to put a lot of, and this really applies to like somebody who's older, for example. You don't want to put a lot of hard, crisp lines all around them. They won't appreciate it, for one thing. But it'll also take the focus away from the eye, which, you know, many of us refer to it as the windows of the soul. And so you really want the viewer's eye to go to the eyes of your subject. Okay, so I still can't do the eyelashes until I've built up the iris, you know, to the point where I'm really happy. Now I need to get some of these lighter areas in the eye, which means I have to darken other areas. So I'm going to go back into the cobalt blue, put a little burnt sienna in it, a little bit, bring it over and mix it in. So I'll end up with a deeper blue, but don't put too much of that burnt sienna in. It'll really gray down that color too much. So always be looking carefully at your palette. I've occasionally seen people using like a pink plate or something to mix their paints on, and you can't see the color properly unless you have a white surface underneath. So be mindful of that. You know, you'll be able to match or mix your colors more accurately if you are working with a white mix area. Okay, so I'm going to come in here. It's quite dark in some of these spots. And the weird thing is you can see reflection of eyelashes in the eye. If you look right here, right above my nail, you can actually see the reflection of the eye, or the shadow, I guess, of the eyelashes. So I'm going to come in. And the pupil's going to go in here. It's going to be very dark, of course. And there's some definite geometric shapes in here. Let's get this a little darker. And the pupil, or the iris, I should say, is typically a little darker around the rim. As people get older, and I'm noticing this on myself, is that outer rim, which starts off very dark and makes your eyes very distinct as you're younger, as you get older, this tends to gray down a little bit. So people with older eyes, this may not be as dark. Strangely enough, I may have to come back into some of this and just put a couple of touches with white. I hope not, but I might have to. So I want to come in, and as I'm doing this, I want to really flatten out my brush so I can paint with the chisel edge. See how I flattened it? And I can paint the little reflection of the eyelashes here. I might take even a little of that cerulean blue. I like that cerulean blue. I'm going to put a little bit in the eye here. I just like how that kind of hints at that color in a couple of places. I like that combination. I'm going to go Payne's Gray for the pupil. I'm going to start off a little bit thin to start with, and or like not the strongest color to start with. But I'm going to come in along, especially these edges here, and towards the center of the eye. And normally we see a nice distinct pupil, but in this case we're not really seeing it that clear. So again, this is one of those situations where you might go on autopilot and put it really distinct, but it's not going to look correct, right? That's not the effect we're seeing. So if I put it in really stark, I'm going to have to soften it around the edges to make it feel a lot softer. I'm going to come in along this top of the lid here. Maybe even darken some of these lash shadows. Really envious of these lashes. This person has wonderful lashes. But Payne's Gray, I'm going to get this a little stronger in the center, but I still need to soften the outer edges. Damp brush around the outside gets that shape nice and soft. I do see a little light spot through here which didn't really leave, so I'm going to lighten what I can. I'm just going to bring a damp brush along here and pull off what I can. Clean paper towel. Just get rid of that edge there. There. I may end up having to use a little bit of white paint there, but I think I'm okay. All right, so now let's try working in some lashes, some brows, things like that. Let's start with the eyebrow. So this photographer has zoomed in, probably with a portrait setting or a low aperture, low f-stop, so that they have a bit of softness here on the bridge of the nose, right, where the brow starts to come in. So these lines are actually pretty soft. So if I just slightly dampen that, just slightly, and I think in this case I could probably use some little for this brow color and the lashes, I could use a little bit of burnt sienna. Burnt sienna is a little bit too, or not burnt sienna, pardon me. Payne's Gray is a little bit too blue. So if I were to come in and put a little bit of burnt sienna in with my Payne's Gray, I'll get a warmer gray. So I'm going to brush across here with a damp brush. Going back to what I was talking about with the animal fur, to keep it soft. So Payne's Gray with a little bit of burnt sienna gives us a nice sort of warmer brown. And I'm just going to come in really softly with some small strokes here. And you can see I'm getting really delicate, fuzzy little lines, which is actually good because it's not going to bring too much attention to these actual brows. It's not where I want the attention to go, right? But it'll give me a nice start to this, and I can come in over top of this with more on dry paper if I need to. But this is a good way to start anything like a hairline, up along your hairline here. It's a great way to do this because if you make it too harsh, it looks like a wig, or it'll look like stick-on eyebrows or something. It's not going to look very convincing. So all right, so there's a good start to that. I'm not going to paint any more. These ones do become a little bit more distinct, but that's a good start, right, for that. And I can even bring some of that darker color, like it's almost a little bit gray through here. So I'm going to bring this in and get some darker darks even through some of these areas here. Really quite dark through here as well. So I'm putting it over top of that reddish color underneath is showing through. Limited depth of field, yes. Oh, where can I send you pictures of icicles that I took? They are highlighted by the full moon. Ooh, the night, the night we had the full moon, it was totally storming here. So we did not see the full moon. Yeah, you can send it. My email is on, if you go to my website, you can connect with me there. There's my information is there, so you can send it to me that way. When you want to remove color with a very fine pencil, what kind of pencil are you using? When I want to remove color with a very fine pencil, how do you remove color with a very fine pencil? I'm not sure what you mean. What kind of pencil am I using? I'm not using a pencil. Yeah, sorry. I'm not really quite understanding. If you could rephrase that question, I could maybe give you an appropriate answer. I'm not really sure what you mean. All right, so I'm going to come in with, I'm working on the darks here. I'm going to soften this just a little bit here, I think, along the top. Lift a little bit of that. Try to get the shape right. So I just took my damp brush, pulled a little color off. There we go. Just shaping that a little bit better. And now before I come in with anything that looks, even resembles a lash, there's a checklist that I have to go through. Is this dark enough? Do I have that crease the way I want it? That sort of thing. I need to double check those things, because if I don't, and I start putting the lashes on, how am I going to fix that? You can't. And keep in mind that the lashes are going to be very dark. This person has very dark lashes. So I want to make sure that I have all the shadows carved out the way I want them before I proceed. And it's so easy to get impatient. Please try to remember that. There is a tool that I use. It'll cost you $0 because I'm sure you have scraps of paper around. But if you take a piece of cardboard or something like that. Do I have any punched out here? I don't know. I have one. I might have given them all away. No, I might have one here. Okay, I've got... There's one. It's a little piece of cardboard, like Bristol board kind of thing, and I punched a hole in it, but you could cut a little square in it. That would work fine. And you need 2 of them. Because you're learning, this is a really helpful tool. So let's say, for example, I want to see if I'm dark enough or toned down enough in some of these areas, and I can see that I'm not. Now, photos often do look a lot darker, duller, more gray. So I'm not so much concerned about getting it as dull as this, but I do want to get the values right, because the values indicate the shape. So I need to make sure that, some of these areas are as dark as they need to be before I start going to add in lashes and things like that. Up here, how am I doing up here? better, but still not dark enough, not quite dark enough. That sort of thing. So I have a little bit of work that I need to do on the skin tones around the eye. When I want to remove color in the form of a very fine line, what type of brush should you have? That's a good question. There are a number of ways of doing this, but basically what I will do if I'm trying to remove a very thin line is I will take usually a synthetic brush because the bristles are a little bit more springy, and I flatten it. All right, so if I flatten it like this, right, you can see sideways it looks, pointed as a needle, and I will use that chisel edge to go along and lift a line. There is another tool that you can use. Let me just quickly grab it. This is something called an erasing shield. And you can see that there's all kinds of shapes and dots and things like that in this. Let me see if I can actually show you how to use it. Okay, these are probably a little bigger than I need, but a little bit wider than I need. But let's say I want a little highlight right in this eye here. I might take something like Mr. Clean Magic Eraser. And now this would be great if you need to get a highlight, but not so great if you want to paint back into that spot. So keep that in mind, because once you've used Magic Eraser on your paper, you're roughing up your paper a little bit. So then when you go to paint in it, sometimes the paint goes dark, and the paper surface quality is not there anymore. Now it's really easy to accidentally hit some of these other places. So what I would do, and I'm going to use this little slot right here on the eye, so make sure I place it correctly. Okay, and I'm going to cover up the holes that I don't want to accidentally transfer. Okay, so I'm isolating that shape. Now I've dampened, okay, by my little tiny piece of Magic Eraser. I put it in my water and I'm wringing it out so that it's not wet. You really want to make sure it's not wet, because if it is, that wet will drip underneath this shield and you're done, because it'll just go everywhere. So it needs to be quite dry. You need to wet it at first, but you need to take all that, most of that out. So if I were to take and work at this for a moment, you can see I'm getting quite a light spot in that area. So if I pull this off, you'll see I've made a white mark. So this is an erasing shield. I got this at my local art store, but I think you might be able to get it at an office supply place, Staples or Office Depot or whatever you've got near you might have it. And this can be helpful for picking out those little tiny bits. Otherwise, a little bit of white paint isn't going to kill you. So I promise nobody's going to call the art police. All right, so... And in a case like that, I probably would have used white paint rather than going to all that trouble. But yeah, if you're just using a brush, I would flatten it, like almost pinch it till it's almost dry. And let's see, what can I lift out here? Maybe a little bit right along here. And then blot it off as you go. And you might have to wet it a number of times to do that, but that's how you can get a very small area if you need it. Okay, so let's carry on. I need to darken some of these areas, and I need to dull them a little bit. So I'm probably going to bring in a little bit more of that cerulean into my skin tone mix. But let's wet this one more time. Careful not to activate any of the painting that I've done in the eye, but let's go around. The great thing about drying is you can re-wet it again and things stay fine. Could use a stencil for your shield. A stencil? Oh, like a stencil brush kind of thing? I suppose you could, but if you get your brush as dry as I made the magic eraser, you can brush in and do a. I've got a whole demo on how to use a stencil with watercolor. If you look under my live tab on my YouTube channel, you'll see that there's one on using a stencil with watercolor. So the ways you can do that, if that's what you're referring to. But anyway, I've got a nice shine everywhere. Let's just double check to make sure that I've got this wet enough. There we go. All right, now I want to use some of this same color. I'm going to go use maybe a little bit more of the raw sienna this time. I reddened things up, but now I think I might put a little bit more raw sienna in this time. A little bit of that cerulean just to dull things down slightly. All right, let's come in and try this out. A little more cerulean blue, and make sure my brush isn't too wet because I really need to make kind of a fine line here. And let's get a little bit more of that blue here, a little bit here. It's funny that we see blue, but it's where the skin gets thinner and we see more of the blood flow, or the blood vessels in your skin. And you'll find that as you start to build up shadows more, the more sculptural, three-dimensional your portrait's going to look. A little bit more on the nose, not too dark, but a little bit here. I won't do the other side of the nose where it starts to get really dark on the other side, but we have a little bit of shaping that starts to happen on the nose here. So let's put a little bit there. Make sure that's nice and soft. So those light areas that we did at the beginning are starting to look lighter because we're making things darker. If you want to make something look lighter, you need to make something else look darker. I bought a brush at Michael's called a stiff scrubber that works well to remove paint. Yes, you can. I have something similar to that. I think I've had it a long time. It's a Jack Reed brush. I don't think I have it in my little jar right here, but yeah, I have something similar, and there's a few companies that do make different tools for that, specifically for that scrubbing. And I'm going to take a little bit more of that cerulean, mix it in. Get into that crease, which will make it look darker. I want to be careful of using something like a Payne's gray or something like that in those creases. I need it to harmonize with what I've got in and around that area. So I'm using some of the same colors that I had originally used in the making of my skin tones. But you can see that it's feeling a lot more dimensional. And I'm going to dry this. You can see why I didn't do a portrait in one demo, like a whole portrait. You can actually do it. And you know, I belong to a group and they do 15 minutes for a portrait. And that's actually a really good exercise as well. Learning to capture the main shapes in a short amount of time is, you think, well, yeah, but you're not going to produce anything great. Well, no, you won't. But what will happen is that you're training your brain, and by using these fast exercises, it trains you to make quicker decisions about the important shapes and things like, and shadows and their placement, because you don't have time to get into the details, right? You have to capture as much as you can in as short a time as possible. So, okay, let that cool just a moment. I'm going to move on to the eyelashes because they're going to be one of the last things I do, but I want to show you how to do these freckles, because these freckles are really quite charming, and I see a lot of people trying to make freckles, but they end up looking like measles, right? They're too strong, and they're too dark, and all of this kind of thing. So I am working on dry paper for this, but I'm going to have some clean paper towel right ready. And as I put in the wet color, now I'll use maybe some burnt sienna for it. Let's mix it in with some of this so it gets darker. The gray that I was using on the face. So I'll mix it in with that and make a dark brown. Just take a little burnt Payne's gray, just a little Payne's gray into it and make them darker. All right, so I'm going to make this a little bit puddly, not like this consistency, right? Not a big sopping wet puddle, but also not dry paint. So I want to go in with something like this. And we'll try a couple to start with. So I'm going to take my paper towel clean, have it clean, ready to go. And let's put in a dot. And you'll notice every time I make a dot, I blot it. I might thin this for some of the lighter freckles. And some I might just leave fine, you know, just the way it is. But most of the time I'm blotting, because the blotting will kind of smash it into the color there. And it does tend to look a little more believable. Really like the freckles on this person. And yeah, you can make them all exactly the way you see them kind of thing, but you can also, most freckles you can make up. You can see that immediate blot really makes things softer. I could still build on top of these, and I might reinforce some of them if I need some of them darker, that kind of thing. But yeah, all in all, that's an easy way to get the freckles done. Really have to be careful not to make polka dots. They are very random. They're different sizes. As you go around the face, they go from being more circular to being a little bit more of a line because of the foreshortening, that sort of thing. But yeah, you can get some of the freckles in there. Much on TV where I can't comment. Just logged into the laptop so I can say hello to everyone and thank you for this lovely demo. Oh, you're very welcome, Marilyn. Hi, I've used a scrubber brushes before. I use a lot of water, scrub lightly and delicate strokes so you don't damage the paper. You have to be careful if you get those little scrubber brushes too wet. Sometimes it can reactivate paint around it, so you do have to be careful if it gets too wet. You may have to just kind of repeat with a little bit less of a wet brush, but it depends on how much you're trying to scrub off. Sorry for chiming in so late. Thanks for your lessons, Shelley. They are very helpful. I am in Tecumseh, Ontario, next to Windsor. Oh, hello. And welcome. Rosemary and Company sells the Eradicator brush. So yes, I remember hearing that name before. By the way, lately there seems to be like an epidemic of spelling my name without an EY. So I just want to mention, if you are sharing any of my content or anything, try to remember that my name is Shelley, EY. And I say that because if somebody is looking for me and they're not spelling my name right, they're not going to find me. So it's Shelley with an EY on the end, and prior with an I, not a Y. I don't usually have too much problem with my last name, but my first name is frequently spelled incorrectly, and so I'm just going to mention that, and on we go. So I'm going to go to a finer brush for the lashes, naturally. So I'm going to take a, let me see. Oops, I accidentally turned out my light here. It's a touch sensitive, and I reached over and turned it off. Okay, so I've got a nice... This is a 0, I don't know, gold. I can't even read the name on it anymore. I don't know what brand it is, but it is a Gold Sable Series 900, I think. 0. Anyway, it's long bristled 0 liner, and it's got a nice little point. So, yeah, name misspellings are frequent, but now I'm going to go, like I said, I'm going to go into my Payne's Gray. I'm going to put some burnt sienna into it because I don't really want it too bluish. So I'm going to put some burnt sienna in my Payne's Gray so I get more of a little bit warmer of a black. And I can still see some of my pencil lines, so here we go. I'm looking especially where it starts, but where it ends up, like whether it's going down and so on. Thank you, Mark. All right. Eyelashes can overlap. They can crisscross sometimes. That's just because they're not They're not that perfect. They're not lined up like matchsticks in a matchbook. So keep that in mind. They don't all need to line up or be spaced evenly. We have that tendency as humans to just want to organize things. These almost feel like they're too long, but I know that they're not. Especially since I've painted this a little bit larger. Now this is a strange little area, right? I'm right in this transitional stage where the eyelashes go from going one direction to the other direction, and when they're coming straight at you, it's it kind of throws you off. You know, you have to think of it in perspective, and it almost sometimes just looks like a dash or a dot, and it's very, very weird to get used to. But okay, so we're starting now. Here's the transition. It's starting to come across. And we're starting to flip up now past the crease in the eye. I probably could have had the crease in the eye a little darker, but I wanted to sort of keep going. So and I'm filling up this brush. I'm not just loading the tip. I'm filling it up so that I can complete an entire lash. You know, I'm working large, so I need to be able to complete an entire lash here. All right. Like I said, they will crisscross, and need to keep my paint just at a nice fluid consistency, but lots of color in it, of course. I don't want to have transparent lashes. All right, so here's where the lash line, because the eyelids, we're looking sort of down on the eyelid here, but here we're looking under the eyelid, and so the lash line starts to change. So where the roots are, we're actually going to see a little bit of that skin right there, which needs to be a little darker, but oh well, too late now. We need to move on. So you'll understand the process. Obviously, I could spend a lot more time just working around the eye with skin tone, build up, that sort of thing. But this gets pretty solid through here. Wow, look at this. And then the lower lashes. And they're not coming from the eyeball. Very important to note that they do not come from the eyeball. You've all seen it, right? Somebody who's painted eyelashes that come out of the eyeball. They don't. Maybe you've even done it. I'm sure I've done it. You know, when I was learning and didn't notice. And that's the thing. You really have to practice, because you kind of kick yourself for not noticing things once somebody points it out to you. But you're not going to notice everything right from the beginning. My gosh, you'd be an expert like you'd be a master painter right from the beginning if you noticed everything. So yeah, cut yourself some slack. Understand that it's a learning process. You'll miss something, but you'll catch it on the next one because you learned from it. I'm also looking here at how curvy these lines are. Some of the lashes are straighter than others. Some are a little bit curvy. And they're starting to transition here, where they're coming straight at us again. This is like the best part, right? It's being able to put the eyelashes on. I mean, I like just painting eyelashes just because it's, or not eyelashes, but eyes, just because it's interesting. I think it's a fun process. And although these look short, and they might be shorter than the other lashes, but they are definitely curving in different directions. So here. It's just, I could turn my piece around, but it's just easier for me to go from tip to root at this angle. So normally I would just turn things around, but there we go. That gives you some idea anyway of how I might approach the lash lines, and really notice the change of angle of some of these lashes. It's crazy, right? It's because they're attached to this spherical shape. Oh yes, Linda says Shelley is doing a 3-day person workshop at Hummelstown, Pennsylvania, June 9th to 11th with the Pennsylvania Watercolor Society. So just think how great it'll be to learn from her in person. Yes, I actually love doing in-person workshops. They are a super opportunity for me to get to see what you do. So I love to be able to have that opportunity and to be able to sort of guide you in person, which is really hard to do here, but it's wonderful. I'm looking forward to that. I'm going to get a little bit more paint mixed up here because I want to do these eyebrows at the same time. So now I started off with some of these very light marks here for the eyebrows, but let's start coming in with some distinct eyebrows here, or distinct lashes or hairs, I guess, on the brow. And it does get pretty sort of dense through here. Unlike me, I notice as I get older, I'm losing on my eyebrows. Where are they going? Where'd they go? Oh, the joys. So I'm going to just take this same liner brush, just blot it and just soften a little bit of this at the beginning, just to soften up some of those lines just slightly. Struggling a bit here to get the consistency right. There we go. Sometimes you just got to play around a little bit to get the right flow. Oh, you're welcome. All right, so let's keep going here. I don't want to leave too many gaps here. There's maybe a little bit of skin showing through, but most of this is pretty filled in. And I could block it in and give this person's Groucho Marx kind of look, but I don't want to do that. So I'm going to do these sort of more delicately. Here, let's get this flowing here a little bit better. There we go. So as I get to some of the hairs towards the outside, I'm going to make them a little bit closer to the skin tone, which sounds weird, but it's to help with that blending into the skin, because it's so to keep it from looking pasted on, basically. So I'll show you what I mean in a minute, but I want to finish getting the basic brow shape here. The hairs above come down on an angle. The hairs underneath kind of come up. All right, so now maybe some shorter hairs. They start to get a little bit more sparse, but as they come down, this is so zoomed in, these hairs aren't even all that thin, but as they come down, they are definitely changing angle. And some of them are changing length too. Like these ones are shorter. Observation. So much of it comes down to how observant have you been with your direction, your thickness, your edges. There's a lot to think about with watercolor. If you think you can just learn it in a week, I think most painters will tell you that that's kind of impossible. There's just too much. Even if you really dedicate yourself. It took me a really long time, but I've enjoyed every minute of it. I mean, you have to enjoy the process. I like the challenge of watercolor, the fact that it's not the easiest medium, and especially painting realistically, right? If you're trying to paint realistically in watercolor, that's sort of like extra challenging, which is why I want to do it. Right? It's just, yeah, bring on the challenge. I love it. All right, so I'm going to go into some more, I'm going to maybe put some more brown in this, make some of these a little bit more brown. And even though they're not brown in here, let's put maybe a little bit of red in it too. A little bit like the skin tone. And I want to get this mixed in here a little bit. So let's thin this more. There we go, thinner paint. So, and you see how that has softened that edge? It's when you get that really instant contrast at the, especially somebody with really dark hair like this, you get that instant contrast. All of a sudden it looks like, remember when we were kids and we had those candy wax lips, and, you could tell because they had this hard outline and it was such a bright, bright red, unnatural. So this is helping to blend it into those skin tones. Even though, when you're actually looking at it, it doesn't look like it's brown, but this is going to help with that sort of transition into those brows. You could actually spend more time than I did going in and building up some of those values even further. So I'm going to zoom out a bit, and although I won't really paint the edge here with all the detail and stuff, because I don't really see it anyway, it's just kind of a dark line. I'm going to go in with a really dark color here. Let's go Payne's Gray, some burnt sienna. And I'm going to come in along this side and paint that. Now that's kind of a crisp edge. Kind of went a little too curvy there. I'm going to go a little straighter down. I think that edge is a little bit too crisp. I don't know what you think about it, but it looks like a cardboard cutout. So I'm going to soften this edge. It's going to make the face feel a little bit more rounded if I do that. So I am going to actually turn this sideways to do this, because I don't want to put my hand in that wet paint. So I'm going to blot my brush, and I'm going to take this clean blotted brush and just gently rub it along that side to soften that edge. Couldn't make it all the way to the bottom, so I'm just going to hit it again. Start in the middle this time. All right, so I need a little bit more color there, but that little bit of softness. Don't you think that that made a little bit of a difference? I'm going to take some more. I'm going to take more of this color and just put that in there one last time. There, and that soft edge is going to just make that feel more natural. Okay, so that is pretty much it for today, I think. Kept you here long enough. It is, oh my gosh, it's noon. So much for a 1 hour demo. It's a 2 hour demo. Okay. So let me just make sure I haven't missed any questions. Oh, I'd love to come to the UK. Actually, I have some friends there, so that would be lovely. Okay, let me just, I'm reading back as far as I can here. I've got to go. Thank you, Shelley. I appreciate your tutorial generosity. Okay, thank you so much for spending your morning with me, or your afternoon, depends on where you are, I suppose. I hope you got lots out of this, and that you maybe not be too scared of this. I do see I need to kind of fix up this edge here a little bit. It is running away from me. So let's just hit this edge here before this. I don't want to let you go and leave this a mess. So let's just soften this. I have to make sure my brush isn't too wet, or all that wet paint's really going to come crawling out. There. See how that soft edge makes it look kind of rounded? All right. I'm going to leave it there. I hope you have a wonderful week, a wonderful afternoon or evening, whatever the situation is for you. And we'll see you next week. We'll probably do maybe a little bit more on portraits. Okay? See you next time. Bye. Thanks for joining.